The latest edition of Wine2Wine takes place in Verona on the 25th and 26th of November 2019. I am super honored to have been invited to appear on a panel discussing podcasts, audience growth, education, and social sustainability, which I hope to broadcast here at a later date. As part of my preparation for that talk, I put together a special deck that sets out all of the podcast equipment that I use to produce Interpreting Wine. To see that, and I hope get you started on your podcasting journey, just head to interpretingwine.com/kit. This series was recorded at this year's Wine2Wine in Verona and will feature interviews with the key organizers, as well as selected speakers, bringing the experience of this major digital event and allowing you to feel a part of proceedings no matter where in the world you are. Today's episode of the Wine2Wine series features Maureen Downey of Shea Consulting. A world-renowned wine fraud expert, Maureen tells us her origin story and transition into this line of work. We talk education in detecting wine fraud, the scale of wine fraud, where in the world that counterfeiting is most prevalent, as well as the Shea method, its students, and her appearance at Wine2Wine in Verona. Enjoy.
Unlike about 99% of people who are in the wine industry, I actually started studying wine in college and intended to get into the wine industry. I started studying as a student at Boston University and studied through college, and when I graduated, I took the advanced MS, and I did quite well, and the Court of Master Sommeliers moved me to New York. And after managing restaurants for a couple of years, I ended up working in wine auctions. So for the last 20 years, I have been, more than 20 years now, I've been dealing with private wine collections. And what I am known for is finding counterfeit wines and authentication and chasing bad guys. So that started for me in the year 2000. So I've been doing this for quite a while. You know, a lot of people kind of stumble into wine as a second career, and I'm one of the odd birds that actually intentionally went into this career. And of course, I would never have known that I would end up doing authentication and, you know, working with the FBI and inspecting bottles of wine all over the world and managing private wine collections. But it's turned out to be an interesting path and a pretty unique direction for somebody in the wine industry to take. When I first started working in auctions, I wasn't really aware that fake wine was a thing. But I started finding bottles that were inconsistent with other known authentic bottles. And so I talked to my bosses at the time I was at Morel & Company, and they confirmed, oh yeah, you know, there are fake wines. And I thought that was so crazy. And then actually one time, I came into work and there was a fax from some German guy, and he was asking all these weird questions about bottles. And so I took the fax into the warehouse and I looked at the bottles and I answered all these questions about the glass and the paper and, you know, what was written on the upper right-hand corner of the label and, you know, weird things like that. And, you know, he wanted to know like exactly how certain things were presented, like capital A period type stuff. And I was like, God, this guy's a weirdo. And so I answered all the questions and I gave the paper back and it was faxed back to him. And then the next day I came into work and there was another fax from the guy, and now he wanted photographs. So, I was taking all these photographs, and Peter Morel walked by and asked me what I was doing. And I said, I'm taking pictures for some guy that's interested in bidding on these. And he goes, oh, well, where is he from? And I said, Germany. And he goes, what's his name? And so I grabbed the fax and I said, Hardy Rodenstock. And Peter Morel goes, well, you know, they say he counterfeits wine. And then I realized that this guy was having me authenticate these bottles for him to potentially buy. And of course, Hardy Rodenstock turns out to be one of the most infamous counterfeiters of modern times. So it's interesting that I have him to thank for really sparking my interest in this, because after that, I realized, well, wow, there really are counterfeits out there. So I didn't have anybody to really teach me what to look for. So I what I did is I went to different people who were experts in different fields, like paper. So I had a friend that worked at the Met in New York, and she introduced me to somebody who worked in the documents department. And so I took this woman out and plied her with as much, food and wine as I could, and I just asked her tons of questions about the history of paper and how it ages, and then I went and I visited printers, and I sought out glass experts, and so I've kind of become an expert on all the different parts of a bottle, and then I started applying that to how I look at bottles. And when you put 12 bottles up and 3 of them are different, it becomes pretty apparent. So I think that I had the natural skills of a little bit of OCD, a good attention to detail, a very strong memory, and the one thing that's really important is pattern recognition. So putting those skills together with the knowledge that I would go out and grab has really helped me get to where I am. And now I'm at the point where I research forgers. I research the great forgers of the world to learn their tricks, and then I try to see if I can find that in the field.
As a psychologist myself, I'm very happy that you've already kind of brought up the the OCD, the kind of the personal side of things, the attention to detail, and just sort of being intrigued and just wanting to just make sure that something is accurate and is correct and as it should be. But I'm also thinking as well, just kind of the educational side of things. What has sort of really, by the sounds of things, you've had to go out and do for yourself. I love this idea of I'm going to go and speak to and get alongside the experts on the paper side of things, really kind of pick their brains. And yeah, it's not really a specific question, but I'm just curious just to sort of riff on that a little bit, just in the sense of, would that path potentially have been very different nowadays, in terms of are there courses out there that can kind of teach those things to people, or are people on the whole, still needing to kind of go out and kind of do the legwork themselves in the same way that you have?
For the most part, the industry is secretive and self-taught, and I think that historically, learning about authentication has been more of a traditional mentorship, where somebody works for somebody who allegedly knows something. That has not served us very well. I don't think enough of the industry has taken the scientific approach that my team and I take. Recognizing that, and recognizing that the industry was really underserved in terms of, not only industry quote-unquote experts who should know what they're doing, but also in terms of consumers being able to have some sort of a fighting chance to protect themselves against all these, quote-unquote experts who aren't doing any due diligence, and or against, straight up crooks. We have, several years ago, we started a website called winefraud.com, and it's an educational resource for consumers and trade alike. We don't really teach people on there. It's just a resource to see authentic and counterfeit versions of a number of different bottles. And then realizing that we really needed to do a bit more, we started doing some training sessions, which were, just a 2-day course. And there was a lot of demand from people to learn more, to know what we know. So we now actually have an online, my authentication method is called the Shea method. And it's just a systematic approach to authentication. But I am teaching a number of people all over the world everything that I know. And I'm not holding anything back, because I think that the more people that we have educated, the more people that we have shining bright lights into dark corners, the better off the wine industry is going to be, and the better we're going to be able to serve the consumer and each other. It's really sad to me that so many people in our industry would happily do harm to their, colleagues, and obviously also their clients. So we've started this online. It's a combination of online and in-person training. It's invigilated by Siobhan Turner, who was the executive director of the Institute of Masters of Wine for 8 years before joining the team at Shea Consulting. So she's got a little bit of a background in knowing how to construct courses and train people. So it's 8 online modules with a number of different assignments that need to be done, and then spending a good amount of time working with us in real life authentication situations, because really it's authentication is, although we use a lot of science, it's an art, and you need to have a feel for it. So you need a lot of time, experiencing and touching bottles and seeing the real things and seeing the red flags that we see. So I'm really excited that we're training people all over the globe now to do this.
Genuinely, I'm sitting here, I can feel my face flushing, really, just hearing this, and I can just feel something kind of welling up inside of me, because it feels just, what is the word, outrageous, really, that there is no course, there is no sort of universally recognized standard. There isn't a sort of a gold standard, a diamond standard, whatever out there to just say, yes, this bottle is authentic, or it isn't, and that it's obviously then left open to anybody outside. I mean, if this were, a dollar bill, has X numbers of points of verifiability, and that we all can get involved and we can all kind of use to protect ourselves. But it feels like the wine world is just leaving itself completely open to whoever should choose to come in and start counterfeiting.
Yeah, I would say that it's actually even a little bit worse than that, because not only is there not a standard of care in the wine industry, wine and spirits, there is no standard of care, there's no expectation, and in fact, the vast majority of time that we find counterfeit bottles in people's collections, the vendors will make the owner of the bottles sign an NDA, and they take the bottles back before they'll refund them. And don't think for a second those bottles don't end up right back in circulation. So they just don't want to eat the losses. They care much more about profit than principle. Unfortunately, the wine industry is loaded with people who have sometimes failed out of other industries or are into wine because they think it's fun, and they can be less than professional. And this lack of standards in a lot of areas is very bad for those of us who try to have integrity and be upstanding in the industry, as well as for consumers. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that. We want people to be better, yet until we created this, this training program, there was no way for them to be better. So what we think that we've now done is we've put a line in the sand that says, if you care, you're going to get educated. And if you don't get educated, now that the resources exist, you are choosing to be negligent. And that's as good as we can do, for the moment.
Okay, and before I hope we kind of bring things back to, a more optimistic note, I guess, and a more positive note. Oh, and if you would actually just share what you just shared off mic, just around the scale of this and the sort of the level to which forgeries and fraud are being perpetrated.
So a couple of the things that are very interesting, if we look at the modern, kind of the modern cycle of counterfeit wine, you had Hardy Rodenstock, who made old and rare, predominantly Bordeaux. And then you had Rudy Kurniawan, who gets out of jail next September, who made everything. He made Bordeaux, he made Burgundy, he made white wine, he made red wine. But again, he kind of focused on the old and rare aspect. Now, old and rare wine is harder to counterfeit. It's harder to make because you have to age the paper and you have to get period correct glass and all of those things. So what we have seen is, in the wake of modern counterfeits, with very few prosecutions and really only one person going to jail for any significant amount of time, we have seen a massive uplift in the world of counterfeit wine. The other huge factors that are contributing, I think, to this rise of counterfeits, other than a lack of prosecution, is that we live in a digital age and we live in a very small world. So counterfeiters can now hide behind computers. They can become experts on whatever it is they're counterfeiting. They can anonymously order all of the pieces that they need to create these counterfeits. They can have, counterfeiters are having capsules made that look just like authentic producer capsules. Nobody's asking questions. And they can hide behind their computer screens to sell these bottles. So what we are currently seeing is a move away from the old and rare, super expensive bottles of wine. And we're seeing current and recent release bottles. And we're seeing the counterfeiters move down the quality chain into mid-tier wines, which is really scary. Because where it used to be that, oh, well, I don't buy DRC or I don't buy Lafite, so I'm okay. Now, if you buy $40 Brunello de Maltacino, or even, Rosé from the south of France, there's a very real likelihood that you could be coming in contact with counterfeits. So it's a little bit scary out there. The other thing that we find that has been a huge boon to the counterfeiters is in the interest of including cosmetic anti-fraud on labels. A lot of producers have gone away from plate press production and they've gone to digital production. Well, a digital printer is only about $500,000. And if you're making Romane Conti, that's not a big investment. So unfortunately, we're already seeing counterfeit versions of the invisible ink anti-fraud and other things that producers are trying to put up. So, it's a never-ending battle. And it's one that everybody needs to be aware of and they need to admit. A lot of people give me flack and they say, oh, you just talk about this because it's good for your business. And in fact, I really am trying to be an advocate for the people of integrity who work in the industry, for the producers, and for the consumers who want to make sure that they're having an authentic product.
Super fascinating subject, and it's, as I said before, this is an episode that I've been looking forward to. And actually, I will just ask one more question before we try to kind of take the conversation to a slightly different place. But my mind immediately goes to the wine that's in the bottle, because you've spoken about the glass, you've spoken about the printing and all these other things. You haven't yet spoken about what wine is going to be sitting in that bottle that's $40 or a more expensive one. Who's making it? Are there any sort of themes or ideas around where are people sourcing that wine?
So when we inspect for authenticity, the one thing that we do not check is the wine itself. We check sediment, we check color, but we obviously cannot open the bottle to check. And beyond that, especially when it comes to old and rare wine, I don't believe that anybody can really taste for authenticity, or at least there are very few people in the world that can. I believe that producers who have been working, with their same land and their same grapes for generations clearly can. There are some people who grew up with amazing cellars like, Serena Sutcliffe, who probably can taste for authenticity. But bottle variation and changes in different bottle conditions are such that I just don't think that if people could taste for authenticity, wine fraud wouldn't be as rampant as it is. Because anytime there was a counterfeit bottle, it would get called out. For the most part, that doesn't happen. So what is in these bottles? Who knows? I mean, I know what Rudy put in his bottles because we found the formulas at his house, or the FBI did. It's usually a lesser version mixed to try to emulate some sort of tasting note that is available usually online. Again, counterfeiters are, the age of technology is, it's great for convenience, but it's great for convenience of criminals as well. So we're not sure what is in these wines. I mean, sometimes we know that when people get caught, like the guy who bottled 17% of the entire vintages of 2013, 14, and 15 of the Côte d'Aron, he was using lesser wines and making them Chateauneuf de Pape, or he was blending in wines from Spain. When we recently saw the same thing happen in south of France in terms of rosé or in Bordeaux, they're using, for the most part, lesser wines from in Bordeaux from the same region, but they're also using wines that are totally from a different place. They're from Spain. They're from a different country. So if you ask Bill Koch this question, he says that he believes it's all moose piss, so you won't drink it. My friends and I have a whole fridge at home. I have a whole Euro Cave full of counterfeits. So every now and then we get a wild hair and we pop one just to see what they're like. And they're usually, decent replicas. There's a tinge of, there's a spine of Lafite in there, but, how many people can really definitively taste 61 Lafite and know that it's 61 Lafite because they've had it so many times? So who knows? That's the scary part.
Let's talk a bit about geography, because I guess, you've mentioned one or two, figures in the counterfeiting side of things. What about, do we know where the counterfeit is most rife right now? And do we know where these counterfeit bottles are turning up?
So we have a lot of strong ideas about where the counterfeits are happening. And of course, if you're going to talk about counterfeit wine in general, we have to recognize that there are different types of counterfeits. There is a massive amount of IP infringement counterfeit. It's a whole industry in Asia where, Petrus becomes Pacours and Penfolds becomes Penfoids. And as much as we in the West, kind of laugh about those labels, I recognize that I don't read Chinese, and I wouldn't, if you were to present me with two packages that looked very similar, I would, if I wasn't familiar with what it's supposed to look like, I probably wouldn't know. But those can be very comical to those of us in the West. When it comes to fine wine counterfeiting, it is happening in a couple of places, more so than others. Italy is a hotbed. There is a lot of DRC and Screaming Eagle and things like that being made right here in Italy. So in Europe, it's really Italy, Switzerland, and Belgium that we think, as well as France, that are the sources of where this fine and rare wine counterfeiting is occurring. Some of that then goes straight to Asia. There's a different type of counterfeit that is being made in Japan right now, but that's got a good thumbprint, so hopefully we'll be able to find those guys. I mean, obviously, as soon as we can nail down the geographical origin of a particular style of counterfeit, we are that much closer to getting those guys. And I say we. There are a whole bunch of people that internationally work together, including with law enforcement. So like in America, we have an agent who is based in California that I work with very closely to investigate wine fraud and counterfeiting, because wine fraud is a lot bigger than just counterfeiting. And then, in Bordeaux, they have a group of gendarmes, and all they work on is wine fraud and counterfeiting. And in Italy, there's some carabinieri. So there is international law enforcement looking into this stuff. And so as soon as we can start to try to pinpoint, hey, there seems to be a source that we keep hearing about here and here and here, then people will go and investigate. But tragically, it looks like a lot of the big counterfeiting right now is coming out of Europe.
So there's a problem here, but I want to bring this back to the Shea method. So I think the way into that, and I think the way that will bring the listener and will bring me back into that frame of mind, is to tell us about who are the people who are going through this training. Why are they turning up? Geography, and what kind of roles that we can find them in.
The people who've signed up and who are training right now, for the most part, are clearly they're wine industry professionals. Actually, they're not all wine industry professionals. I should take that back. One of them was a cop. One of them was a detective. We've got another guy who's a huge wine collector who is a retired lawyer. So some people are doing this as a second career. But there are a number of people who own, for example, retail operations or storage facilities or both. and they want to make sure that they're properly serving their clientele. So we do have people kind of from all over, and literally geographically we have them from all over. They are, we're on the west coast of America. We've got somebody in Florida. We've got somebody in New Jersey. We have people in the UK. We have several different people in different parts of France, Switzerland, Italy, and then, of course, in Asia. So we've got Taiwan, Macau, a couple different people in Hong Kong, people in Guangzhou and in Singapore. So people are coming from all over, and some of the things about the Shea method that kind of shock them are the fact that we demand that all woods and boxes be opened. Unfortunately, it happens all too often that counterfeiters not only are counterfeiting bottles, but they counterfeit the woods that go along with them. So even if you have a wood that is banded or sealed or it looks like it's never been opened, that is not any kind of security blanket. We've opened up metal banded OWCs of DRC to find Côte d'Aron in them, and banded cases of Bordeaux to find rosé. So the Shea method is it's a systematic approach to authentication, and it marches, through the various different parts of the bottle, and it involves, using different types of lights and magnification and microscopes, and we look at the chemical properties of paper and glue, and we look at the age of the glass and the production of the glass, and it's fairly thorough, and it is a systematic approach. And it's interesting because trainees often, if they skip something, they realize pretty quickly why you have to follow the method the whole time. But it's also kind of fun. It's fun to learn. It's, it's being a detective, and it's getting in. And, we just had our first authentication ever where we authenticated 400 bottles for a client in Russia. And there was a team of 4 of us working for 3 days, and we did not find one counterfeit bottle. That was a first ever. So that was kind of exciting. It was also kind of weird. But the trainees who were there at the time had a great time, because really learning about what's authentic is just as important in terms of recognizing when you have a fake.
Totally fascinating. One thing I do just want to find out about, and kind of bring it all together. What does that training really look like? So let's assume that I, based in London, put my hand up. I'm like, train me. What happens? What does my training exactly look like? Kind of month by month, I guess, and how does that build?
Everyone that gets involved in this training program obviously has a job, or has something else to do. So what we've tried to do is break it up into bite-sized chunks. So there are 8 online modules, each of which has 2.5 to 3 hours worth of presentation with voiceover and or video combination, which in and of themselves are broken up into smaller chunks. You don't have to sit down you don't have to commit 3 hours to sitting down. You can do a half hour here and a half hour there. And then each module also has a number of different assignments. So you might have to, inspect a couple bottles, or tell the difference between a couple bottles, or do a timeline of a producer. History is a very important part of authentication. You have to know history. You have to know food safety laws, things like that. So the 8 different modules break things into different, we have one that's legal, and it's all about, what are the laws in your country, and what are some of the important laws in other countries, in terms of labeling laws, and when did those start? So, a lot of timelines and things like that. So once you have completed the module and any of the assignments that are due for that module, those are sent to Siobhan, and she, as soon as she passes them, you would then, the trainee then has a meeting, a Skype meeting with her, to go through the learnings of the module, to see if you have any questions, the trainee has any questions about, about anything that was covered in that module. I didn't want it to be a test where you have to pass a test, because this isn't something that you can pass a test for. You have to show aptitude and understanding, and that's far more important to us than, knowing a couple of pieces of information. So at the end of all of that, actually, and you don't have to wait for the end, we usually start having people work with us after about module 4, once you've gone through how we in detail inspect bottles. A trainee will come and work with us, or have us come to them. If they have a retailer or they work in an auction house, we will travel to them, and so they get their stock authenticated at the same time that we are training them. So, and then, once somebody shows that they've really got a good aptitude for it and they've completed the modules, they are certified, and then they can use the Shea Vault. And the Shea Vault is our new, so after 20 years of focusing on counterfeits, I've finally got a system by which we've created a system, a technology, by which bottles can be authenticated either at the time of production with provable provenance, meaning documentation that literally proves that the bottles have come directly from a producer to a vendor, or in the secondary market, being authenticated by certified authenticators. So in the secondary market solution, we put a plastic PVC overcap that has a code, and it's got a little sandwich in it of an RFID chip with a anti-tamper disc over that is a hologram with a QR code, a digital QR code. And all of that gets heat shrunk onto the top of the bottle to prove that it's authentic. So the authenticator will have gone through the whole systematic approach in this online software system, taken some images of the bottle, and they can then upload the information into the blockchain, and now that bottle has an online ledger of authenticity and provenance that shows not only the information about the bottle, but an image of the actual bottle, the condition report of the bottle as it is today, and any provenance that is proved or known about that bottle. So these bottles, when they go to be sold, the URL or a hyperlink can be put on a licensed vendor's website, so that the potential buyer can actually go online and see that this bottle has been authenticated by an independent third party, and they can actually see a photo of the actual bottle and any provenance information. And we think that this is going to be the future of how wine will be purchased, because nobody buys fine wine really by going to a store and touching it. It's always purchased sight unseen. So we're really trying to give consumers some power and some information and some provable data, because the trust that consumers have given to the wine trade has not served them well, in the fact that many vendors really don't care about authenticity or provenance. When price is more important than provenance, bad bottles get sold. And we're going to try to protect people who want to buy good bottles from good vendors. So the Shea Vault is our new way to protect that. And we've actually got a couple $1 million worth of wine available for sale right now on the Zacky's December 7th auction. And links to all of those bottles are available on the Zacky's website, and they're also available on SheaVault.com. So if you want to actually see the ledgers and how this works, that information is there.
Absolutely fascinating. I've had to put my pen down to stop me writing things down to ask you about. And I feel like this is definitely a subject that I'd love to revisit. I'm so happy that you've shared in the way that you have. And really, just to close out, we're sitting here in Verona, which is very exciting. We're both here at the invitation of Wine2Wine, and we'll both be presenting. And I'd ask you to share with us, what are you sort of looking ahead to sharing, and where do you hope that might lead in terms of impact in the future?
So to start with, I'm thrilled to be in Verona, because this is one of my favorite cities in the world. I love it here. It's so beautiful. And in terms of food and wine, there's just not a better place. And the shopping can be very dangerous as well. So it's kind of got the trifecta of those things. But what I'm really excited about is that, for the last 20 years, I have had to really harp away and focus on counterfeit wine. And now that we've started this technology company and we're using technology to help empower both vendors and consumers avoid the problem of counterfeit wine, I'm really, really excited to be able to come at the whole issue with a positive angle and not from the negative angle. To be able to focus on authenticity and provenance rather than on fraud is just the most refreshing thing. I know that most people won't understand that, but 20 years of focusing on a negative, and then, today finally being able to focus on the positive, it's just a ray of sunshine. So I'm really excited to share with people how, a couple kids from Silicon Valley have gotten together and figured out how to, conquer this blight on this incredibly opaque industry that we have. The wine and spirits industry is the most opaque in the world. There's not another industry in which a 28-year-old kid with $35 million worth of a product would be able to walk into an auction house, and sell that without the media questioning it, without the consumers questioning it. And that's exactly what Rudy Kurniawan did. In one sale, he sold $35 million worth of counterfeit wine, 1 2-part sale through Acker Merrill Condit. And nobody batted an eye. If that had been jewelry or art or cars, there would have been tons of questions about provenance. So addressing the kind of the double-edged sword of authenticity and provenance using technology, I'm hoping is going to help bring the wine industry into the modern era. And what's amazing is that I get to talk about that in, not only the room that we're sitting in, which is, has a 700-year history, but in this city that's really ancient. So the combination of the modern and the ancient together is very exciting.
Thank you so much, Maureen. This is such an important topic, and I'm so happy that we got to sit down together. I've left below links to winefraud.com and shayconsulting.com. If you're new to interpreting wine, I'd absolutely love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm @interpretingwine on Instagram and Facebook, @winepodcast on Twitter, or email hello@interpretingwine.com. Next time on the podcast, I'll be featuring another speaker from the Wine2Wine conference in Verona. See you then.